I was a fool in love. That's the only way to explain how I never saw it coming. Michelle and I had built a life together, brick by brick, moment by moment, until it all shattered with a single discovery. It wasn't a dramatic confession or a heated argument that exposed her betrayal. No, it was something much quieter, much crueler. It was a plane ticket, a slip of paper tucked carelessly into her bedside drawer, a boarding pass for a flight to Paris. At first, I thought nothing of it. Michelle traveled often for work, her career pulling her across the globe. But then I saw the date. It wasn't during a conference. It wasn't for a business meeting. And then there was the seat assignment, 2 tickets, side by side. The name beside hers wasn't mine. The moment stretched out, surreal and suffocating. My fingers tightened around the fragile paper as my mind raced, piecing together the fragments of doubt I had ignored for months. The late nights, the hushed phone calls, the way she had begun to distance herself from me, as if I were just another piece of furniture in the home we shared. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I waited. I let the truth settle inside me, let the rage simmer beneath my skin like a slow-burning fuse. Michelle had always been careful, always meticulous. If she was cheating, she had done it with precision, with intent. She had underestimated me. I wasn't just going to catch her. I was going to play the long game. Michelle and I had been together since college. I thought we had it all, until I found the plane ticket. It sat in her drawer like a loaded gun, waiting to go off. A flight to Paris, leaving in 2 weeks. First class, of course. She always had expensive taste. But it wasn't just the destination or the luxury that caught my attention. It was the second ticket. Seat 3B, reserved for Daniel Carter. I didn't know a Daniel Carter, but my wife did. I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at the ticket, my heart pounding in my ears. 1,000 scenarios ran through my mind, each one worse than the last. Was he a long-time affair, someone she had been sneaking around with for years? Or was this new, a reckless indulgence she thought she could get away with? I tried to think back, to remember if she had ever mentioned the name. Maybe a coworker? A business contact? But deep down, I already knew the answer. This wasn't business. That night, I didn't say a word. When she came home from work, she kissed me on the cheek like nothing had changed. She smiled, laughed at some meaningless story, poured herself a glass of wine. I watched her carefully, trying to see her the way a stranger might, detached, analytical. Had she always been this good at lying? I wanted to confront her right then and there. I wanted to hold the ticket up and demand an explanation, to make her stumble over her excuses, to see the guilt wash over her face. But I didn't. Instead, I smiled. I played my part. If Michelle thought she was running this game, she was wrong. Because now, I was playing too. She was flying to Paris. Not for work, not for family, but with him, Daniel Carter. The name burned in my mind, a faceless ghost haunting every second of my day. I imagined him, young, charming, the kind of man who could slip into my wife's world without raising suspicion. Maybe he was someone from her office, a colleague who had become something more. Or maybe he was just some stranger she met by chance, the kind of reckless temptation that leads to whispered hotel check-ins and stolen moments. I could have searched for him right then, dug through social media, called in a favor from a friend who worked in cybersecurity. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to confront the truth. Instead, I watched Michelle. I studied her the way I had never done before. The way she left her phone face down on the counter. The way she turned away when taking certain calls. The way she seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Like a woman who had something to look forward to. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to shake her and demand to know when she had decided that our life, our marriage, wasn't enough. But I forced myself to stay quiet. Because if she had secrets, I would have mine too. The game had changed. She wasn't just leaving me behind. She was erasing me, replacing me, and I couldn't let that happen. So, I made a choice. I wouldn't stop her from going to Paris. I would let her think she had one. But when she came back, she wouldn't be coming home to the life she thought she had left behind. Because by then, I would already be one step ahead. I kept quiet. Instead of confronting her, I dug deeper. At first, it was just small things. The way she lingered a little too long in the bathroom before bed, texting someone under the glow of soft vanity lights. The way she started dressing differently, not just stylish, but intentional, as if every piece of clothing was chosen to impress someone new. Then, I got smarter. I checked our shared credit card statements. I wasn't surprised to find charges at expensive restaurants I had never been to, boutique hotels she never mentioned, gifts I had never received. But what I found next made my blood run cold. Paris wasn't the beginning. There was a pattern. A man in every city she traveled to. Different names, different places, but always the same story. Conferences that ran a day longer than necessary. Business trips where she conveniently forgot to mention the company she was keeping. Daniel Carter wasn't the first. I had spent years thinking I was her husband, her partner, the one person she shared her life with. But I wasn't the only one. I was just the constant in the background, the foundation she could always return to when her little adventures were over. I wasn't heartbroken anymore. I was furious, but I wouldn't let her see it. Not yet. If she wanted to play this game, she had no idea just how dangerous it was to underestimate me. Because now, I wasn't just collecting information. I was planning my revenge. The more I learned, the more I realized, Michelle wasn't just cheating. She was building a life, one lie at a time. Each affair was more than just a betrayal. It was a carefully crafted escape, like she was testing out different versions of herself in different cities. With me, she was the devoted wife, the polished executive. But in New York, she was a woman who spent late nights in bars, drinking whiskey with a man named Brandon. In Chicago, she was someone else entirely, slipping away into a hotel suite under the name Mia Carter. And now, in Paris, she would reinvent herself again. With Daniel. How long had she been doing this? Was I ever really enough for her? Or had I just been a placeholder? The reliable man at home, while she auditioned different fantasies. I stopped looking at Michelle the way I used to. She wasn't my wife anymore. She was a stranger wearing my wife's face. And suddenly, I understood. This wasn't just about pleasure for her. It wasn't about sex or excitement. It was power. Michelle didn't just want passion. She wanted control. Control over me, over the men she used, over the entire narrative of her double life. She had orchestrated everything so perfectly, assuming that I would never question her, never see her for what she really was. But now, I saw her clearly, and she had no idea. I wasn't just going to confront her. I was going to take everything from her, the way she had taken everything from me. Because while she had been playing her little game, I had been setting my traps. I started planning my revenge. Michelle thought she was playing me. She thought she was so careful, so untouchable. But she had no idea I was already steps ahead. I had spent years trusting her, believing in the perfect life we had built. Now, I saw the cracks that had always been there, hidden beneath the surface. And I wasn't just going to expose them. I was going to tear them wide open. I moved in silence, careful not to let her suspect anything had changed. Every morning, I kissed her on the cheek before she left for work. Every evening, I asked about her day, nodding along as she fed me lie after lie. But behind the scenes, I was stripping her world bare. First, the finances. I had always been smart with money. Our accounts were technically joint, but Michelle never paid much attention to them. She assumed I'd always be there to keep things running smoothly. That made it easy. I started shifting assets, rerouting funds into an account she couldn't touch. Slowly, carefully, so that by the time she noticed, it would be too late. Then, the evidence. I compiled everything: receipts, bank statements, hotel reservations, phone records. Every little detail that painted the full picture of her web of deceit. It wasn't just for me. No, I had bigger plans. I wanted proof so undeniable, so damning, that when the moment came, she wouldn't have a single escape route. And finally, the final blow, her reputation. Michelle thrived on control, not just in our marriage, but in her career, her social circle, her carefully curated image. I started making quiet moves, whispering just enough information to the right people, setting the stage for her downfall. By the time she left for Paris, my work would be done. She thought she was leaving for a romantic getaway. But when she came back, she would return to ashes. I pretended to be the devoted husband. Every morning, I smiled at her, kissed her goodbye, and wished her a safe flight. Every night, I lay beside her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breath, knowing she was already dreaming of him. But while she was planning her escape, I was setting my traps. The first step was securing the money. Michelle had always been reckless with spending, but she never noticed the little things. The way our savings account seemed untouched, the way the mortgage was paid like clockwork. She never thought to question where the money was going. That made it easy for me to move it piece by piece into accounts she had no access to. By the time she returned from Paris, her credit cards would be declined, her savings drained, her financial safety net gone. Then came the evidence. I hired a private investigator, someone discreet, someone who knew how to get answers without being seen. I already had enough proof to burn her world to the ground, but I wanted more. I wanted her trapped. Photos, videos, timestamps, all neatly compiled into a folder, a blueprint of betrayal. Next, her reputation. Michelle wasn't just a woman who cheated. She was a woman who built her entire life on an illusion. Her career thrived on her image as a polished, successful executive. Her friends admired her. Her colleagues respected her. She thought she was invincible. I made sure she wouldn't be. Carefully, I reached out to a few key people, colleagues, clients, people who trusted her, people who mattered. I let things slip just enough. A whisper here, a suggestion there, a nudge in the right direction. I didn't need to say much. People love uncovering a scandal on their own. And just like that, the foundation beneath her began to crack. She had no idea. She thought she was outmaneuvering me, thought she would board that plane, spend her nights tangled in sheets with Daniel, return home to a husband still waiting for her. She thought she was playing me, but she had no idea I was already steps ahead. And when the moment was right, I would pull the rug out from under her and watch her fall. The day she was supposed to leave, she came home to an empty house. No suitcases by the door. No neatly packed essentials for her business trip. No husband waiting to drive her to the airport. Everything was gone. The furniture? Vanished. The artwork she carefully curated over the years? Taken. Even the closet. The designer dresses, the expensive handbags, the shoes she had once flaunted like trophies, emptied out. I wanted her to feel it instantly, the same way I had felt it the night I found that plane ticket. That sharp, nauseating panic, the gut-wrenching realization that the life she thought was secure was now nothing more than a pile of ashes. She walked through the front door, her heels clicking against the hardwood, calling my name like nothing had changed. Ethan? Silence. Then, she noticed. I was sitting in the kitchen, sipping coffee like it was just another normal morning. Only the kitchen was bare. No family photos, no warmth, just cold, lifeless walls. She froze. What the hell is this? Her voice was sharp, laced with confusion and the first hint of fear. I leaned back in my chair, watching her like a predator that had already won the hunt. Welcome home, Michelle. Her gaze darted around, frantic. Where is everything? Where's my stuff? I let the silence stretch, let her drown in it. Then I set down my coffee cup, reached into the folder on the table, and slid a stack of papers toward her. Bank statements, credit card records, photos, the blueprint of her betrayal. Her breath hitched as she flipped through them, her fingers trembling. She didn't even try to lie. There was no room for denial, not with this in front of her. Her lips parted, but no words came. I tilted my head. You were planning to leave today, weren't you? First-class flight to Paris, seat 3A, right next to Daniel Carter. Her face went white. How? How did I know? I cut her off, my voice eerily calm. Because while you were busy lying to me, I was busy taking back everything you stole. She dropped the papers onto the table as if they had burned her fingers. Her breathing turned shallow, panicked. You can't do this. I smiled. I already did. I stood up, grabbing my jacket, leaving her standing there in the wreckage of her own making. And as I walked past her, I whispered the final nail in her coffin. You lost the right to call it yours the moment you betrayed me. She called me in a panic. The first time, I ignored it, let her stew in the silence. The second time, I let it ring, picturing her pacing through the empty house, realizing she had lost everything. By the third call, I answered. Where's my stuff? My money? Her voice was breathless, trembling on the edge of hysteria. I leaned back in my chair, taking my time. Gone. A sharp inhale. What do you mean gone? I almost laughed. Almost. I mean exactly what I said, Michelle. Your money? It was never really yours. The accounts? Moved. The house? Not in your name anymore. The credit cards? I chuckled. I'm guessing you figured that one out already. She let out a strangled sound, somewhere between a gasp and a sob. You had no right. Oh, I had every right, I cut in. You think you were the only one making plans? While you were busy sneaking around, I was rewriting the rules of the game. A pause. And then, the shift. The panic melted into anger, because that's who Michelle was. She was never the victim. She was the one who controlled the board. And now that the pieces were moving without her, she didn't know how to react. You think you're so smart, she hissed. You think this is checkmate? I smirked. No, Michelle. Checkmate would mean you had a chance to fight back. This is game over. Silence. For the first time, she had nothing to say. And for the first time, I was the one walking away. She tried to fight. Of course, she did. Michelle had spent her life manipulating, twisting reality to fit whatever story best served her. She wasn't about to roll over and accept defeat. I'll take you to court, she spat over the phone. You think you can just take everything from me? I laughed. Actually laughed. You can try, Michelle. But let's think about this for a second. I leaned forward, enjoying every second of her unraveling. You're broke. Your credit cards don't work. You have no access to our accounts. Your entire lifestyle? Built on my money. I let that sink in. She said nothing, but I could hear her mind racing, scrambling for an escape. And if you do try to come after me? I continued, my voice turning cold. I'll make sure every single one of your colleagues gets a copy of that little folder I left on the kitchen table. Her breath hitched. I smiled. There it was. The realization. The understanding that I had backed her into a corner she couldn't charm her way out of. This is your fault, she whispered. But there was no conviction in her voice now. I shook my head. No, Michelle. This is the bed you made. I just made sure you had to lie in it alone. Another silence. Then, quietly, brokenly, she asked, what am I supposed to do now? I let out a slow breath, standing from my chair, grabbing my keys. You'll figure it out, I said simply. And then I hung up. She underestimated me. Michelle had spent years believing she was the smartest person in the room, that she could manipulate anyone to fit her narrative, that she could betray me and still come home to a life untouched. But now, she was standing in the wreckage of her own making. I gave her nothing, not a penny, not an apology, not even the satisfaction of a final argument. I had already won. There was nothing left for her to bargain with. She called a few more times. I never picked up. She sent messages, some angry, some desperate, some laced with hollow apologies. I never answered. And then, finally, she stopped. I imagined her now, sitting in some borrowed apartment, trying to claw her way back up from the fall. Maybe she had called Daniel Carter, expecting him to be her safety net, only to realize that men like him don't save women like her. They use them. Maybe, for the first time in her life, Michelle understood what it felt like to be disposable. And maybe, just maybe, she finally realized who she had been playing against all along. I wasn't the fool she thought I was. I never was. As she walked away with nothing, I realized something. I had lost a wife, but I had gained freedom. For so long, I had lived in her shadow, believing the life we built was real. I had convinced myself that love meant trust, that devotion meant turning a blind eye to the little things that didn't add up. But now, I saw the truth. Michelle had never been my partner. She had been my prison. And now, I was free. The weight in my chest was gone. No more unanswered questions. No more nights lying awake, wondering why she felt just out of reach. No more wondering if I was enough. Because I was. She just never deserved me. I stepped out into the world, into my new life, knowing I would never be played again. Because I wasn't the fool in this story. She was. The end. If you like this story, please like and subscribe to the channel.